So I'm so thrilled to have you on the show today, after explaining to everybody who you are and what you do. But I wanted to ask you, as we get started out, tell us a little bit about you and how you got interested in studying burnout.
Oh, okay. It's a great question, because in a sense, it's not that I found burnout. Burnout found me in
Oh,
a odd kind of way. I had gotten interested in psychology and social sciences when I went to college. I decided I'd go and get my PhD in psychology, social psychology. So I went off to Stanford to get that. Um, and when I finished, I had been trained to work in the laboratory, and I had done research studying emotion and how people understand their feelings and how do they cope with emotions when, I got interested in the idea of how do you cope with emotions in a situation where you're supposed to be calm and in control and not upset and not, worried, or, show people that you're, what's going on here. So when I started my new job at University of California at Berkeley, um, it turned out when I got there, the lab wasn't ready. They didn't have a lab for me. And I was thinking, oh, wow, okay, so I can't start doing those studies. But you know what I'll do? I'll go out and I'll talk to people in occupations where I think this kind of issue comes up,
mm,
and get a better understanding. And that will help me, formulate, the questions I have and the ideas that I'm thinking about. And then I'll have my lab and I'll go do the kind of research that I had been doing before. And so I started out scheduling interviews with people in healthcare, with people in social services, with police office. I mean, first responders is what we call them today in some sense, but they were very much people working with other people in some kind of situation where there could be some real challenges, there could be some very real difficulties, life or death or chaos and emergencies all around and that kind of thing. And then people would refer me to other people, so it expanded. And after a while, I found that people would be asking me questions that, after they answered mine, they said, "Can I tell you something more about my work?" I'd say, "Sure, yeah, it's confidential." Right? Yeah, yeah, we're taping it, but it's confidential. Um, and then they would tell me things about their experience, sometimes elaborating on my questions, but often bringing in more. And they would get emotional talking about this. They would get angry, they'd cry, they'd get, it's going through and describing things for me. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what did I just stumble upon here? What's going on? And after a while, realizing that there was a kind of rhythm to the story, whether it was coming from a minister or coming from an emergency physician or, et cetera. And I was thinking, something's going on here. So I tried to find concepts in the research literature like dehumanization and self-defense, treating people more like objects rather than, as human beings, or detached concern. So you're
mm.
concerned for your patient, but you have to be detached, and, thinking that would kind of, and at the end of the interview, I'd ask people, does this sound relevant? And they would go, I don't know, well, not really. And then a second serendipitous thing happened, and that was I was at a dinner for all the new people joining the Berkeley campus that year. And I was sitting next to people, we were chatting, sitting next to a woman who was coming in to run the library in the law school. And she asked me about what I was doing. And I said, well, here's some of the themes that are coming out of these interviews I'm doing. And she said, oh my God, I don't know what you call it, but in poverty law, legal services, where I just came from, we call it burnout. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So then in the next interviews, I'd go through detached concern, burnout. Yes, that's it. That's it. And it was kind of like, whoa, okay. And so people who hadn't heard the word before started saying, yes, this describes it. Some people said, yeah, yeah, I've heard other people talk about it. And it was such an evocative term and response that people had to it that when I started writing up my, findings, my thoughts about all of this, I used the word burnout, job burnout, because that was the way they talked about it. And they had kind of rejected a lot of other things. So I didn't give it a formal, you know, academic
Right.
title kind of thing. I went with, in a sense, the language, of the people that I was interviewing. But the interesting thing is that I remember then when Silicon Valley, not far from here, began to develop into its, early entrepreneurial startup phase. There would be these companies that talked about burnout shops. And that's the term I used in the book to sort of frame it in the first chapter. And what they did was essentially take that kind of word and apply it to people working in this business. The idea was, we are a burnout shop. Come, we are going to own you 24/7, okay, for a couple years, and you're going to do this, da da da. And by the time you've burned out, you'll have stock options, you'll have, have fame, who knows, whatever.
Right. Whatever it was worth.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, so I think there are a number of kind of roots, if you will, that led to that term becoming used to describe kind of high intensity, keep pushing the demands higher and higher. If you can do this, you could do more. You could spend the weekend. You could, work,
Right.
So that full on, kind of job model certainly was there, and maybe elsewhere. And I think that's why for a lot of people, it still captures that kind of feeling, of.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. What you just described is fascinating. What really fascinates me, and I hear this so often, is the serendipity of it.
Yeah.
How that was, it was meant for you to discover this. And I know we often don't talk about these things, but it just comes up so often when I'm talking to people who either have discovered something or they're writing about something. It's these events that lead them to it.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. It is.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny because people keep thinking, oh, well, you must have invented the term. No, I didn't. Why did you go out? What were your hypotheses when you were going out to do? And I was saying, I didn't have a lab and I could do the other kind of research. So I was kind of saying, let me find out more about these ideas. And so it was the people talking to me.
Well, that was your lab. I mean,
it's
so interesting. I work in academia a lot, but I work in, obviously, I do a lot of executive coaching, executive consulting. And what I find is that's one big lab. Is talking to people on a daily basis. I know it's anecdotal, however, you learn so much. And so I would ask what I would ask you is, what did you learn about what burnout is? Like, how would you define it?
How would I define it?
Yeah.
Well, it was clearly a response to stressors, and one of the things about it, as a stress response, which is, the sign for that usually is the exhaustion that you have. You've just given every bit that you have physically, emotionally, mentally, and just like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I'm not even sure I can wake up tomorrow and be ready to go again, that kind of thing. So this is the extreme stress response. But a stress response is not a pathology. It is not a sickness. It is not an illness. It is not any kind of thing like that. And I say this because the one thing that people often get wrong about burnout is thinking, it's a personal disease or weakness and something about that person, and we have to fix
not
that
enough
person.
energy. You don't have
energy. What's wrong with
you?
That kind of thing. And it's not. In fact, if you think about it, a stress response is not a pathology. It is a normal thing for all living beings. When there are threats out there, when there are challenges out there, our body, our mind, everything just has to be able to, go into action, and challenge that or deal with it or flee it or, whatever is going to happen there. But then the other important part of that is you have to recover from that stress response. It's the recovery that, if that does not go well, I mean, the body, the human being, let's put it this way, was not meant to be stressed all the time. We know from lots of research on stress and coping that if people are unable to recover well, there are going to be health problems down the road. It can lead to depression or anxiety about what's going on and how do I handle this and and it can also lead to other things like poor performance. You're doing the bare minimum rather than trying to do your very best. You are feeling, bad about yourself and so forth. So it's that recovery process that really is the thing we need to look at. But the other thing about burnout is that two other components that we discovered in the research. You're getting stressed and exhausted, but you are becoming more negative, hostile,
Mm.
cynical about the job, about the people, about the place, about what they're doing. And this cynicism, hostility, take this job and shove it kind of mentality, it leads people to behave differently. This is where you're doing the bare minimum rather than doing your very best. You're
Right.
more likely to make errors. You're more likely to not catch things. The quality of the performance, whatever it is you do, provide healthcare, you teach, you are in a tech thing, you're a financial, whatever is not going as well as it could, and you're not contributing in the same way. So that's for me more the hallmark of burnout, not the exhaustion of stress, but what it does in terms of changing your relationship to your job. And then the third component we found that came out kind of as a separate thing was how you're feeling about yourself. And so it's not just you're negative about the job, but after a while you begin to say, what's wrong with me? Why can't I take it? Why did I choose this job? I should have opened a pet
Right.
store. Some other kind of thing. So that negative self-evaluation, I'm not good at this, I shouldn't be staying, how do I deal with it, is another component of all that. So it's this trifecta burnout really of the exhaustion of stress, the cynicism toward the job, and a negative sense of your effectiveness in the job itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
and
it's those three things together that actually form burnout. It's not exhaustion alone. People will say, "Oh my God,
right.
the job is so much, and I can't really keep up with it. Am I burned out?" And I say, well, how do you feel about the place where you work and the job? Oh, I love it. It's a great job. And this is a terrific place to be. How do you feel about the quality of your work that you're doing? Oh, I know I can do it. And I'm really good at it. I'm really proud of that. But it's so tiring. And I'm saying, you're not burned out. You're overextended and exhausted. And that requires, less than 100%, obviously, it's not the greatest job, but you still love the job. You still are proud of yourself. You haven't gotten to burnout yet. Let's try and make sure you don't
yeah,
go there.
no, and
Yeah.
I love the distinction you make because I think we often associate exhaustion and I'm overextended with
Yeah.
burnout. And so how do you think burnout comes about? What's the climate or the environment that creates that
Yeah.
in your opinion?
Well, it's an excellent question because you're asking what's causing it,
Yeah.
what in the environment. And again, one of the errors that people tend to make is they ask a different question. They say, who is burned
Mm,
out? And they're looking for, how do we diagnose them? How do we find them? Who are the people? The question should be why, and that's what you're
right.
asking. Why are they burning out? And even people who maybe aren't extremely burned out, but are on the way of,
On the brink.
yeah, they'll be affected by it. So the why question is important. And again, to quote the World Health Organization, which officially recognized all this in 2019, they said it was a response to chronic job stressors that have not been successfully managed.
Mm.
Okay. So there's an optimistic note there. They could be better managed. They're not necessarily, you just have to put up with it and that's all it is. So it is chronic, meaning most of the time, job stressors, things that are happening in the workplace and the job. And what we argue in our book, based on the research that my co-author Michael Leiter and I have done, is that we've identified at least 6 areas in which the match or the fit between the person and the job isn't working well. There are 6 areas which some may be working well, but there are others that may not. And so they give you a kind of, they're like signposts as to where you need to look to say, what are the chronic stressors in that area and what could we do to change those, and get to a place where there is a better match and a better fit. So the 6 areas, and these are not in order of importance, probably in order of what people think about.
Mhm.
They always think about workload, too much work.
Right.
So the mismatch there is the demands are high, but the resources, do you have enough time? Do you have the right tools and information? Do you have enough people to do this, to get it done well on time?
Yeah.
No. So
Can I
workload.
stop you on that one
Yeah,
just
yeah,
really quick before you go through all six? Because I
yeah,
think that's such a big one, the workload.
yeah,
What I'm finding in organizations is that the workload isn't getting smaller, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're cutting resources and just, okay, do more with
mhm.
less, do more with
Right.
less.
That's the
Do more.
mantra for burnout, by the way. Do
Right,
more with less.
right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, I'm pointing that out here because I think there's a lot, what you're saying and what you're getting ready to tell us more of
Mm,
is that there's a long-term effect with that short-term strategy.
yeah. Except that it's not a short-term strategy. It's been a long-term one for a
Right.
long time,
That's a
in the
good
sense,
point. Yes.
it says like just for now, but then next year, oh gosh, sorry folks, we've got more contracts, but you know what? We don't have the funds to
But
hire
we
more
did it
people.
fine last year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you'll just have to do more with less, and people
Right.
are getting crazed. I mean, this is like bad math. So yeah, so the workload is clearly one of them, and
Okay.
I'll get back to that in a minute. The second area that is important is the amount of control or autonomy that you have in doing it. And in fact, when we talk to people, it's often not just the workload, it's the uncontrollable workload that you have no say in modifying it, changing it, doing it differently, figuring out how to be more effective getting it done. You have to do it this way and you're locked in and you're, et cetera. The third area we talk about is reward. It's really about the positive feedback that people get when they do a job well. And what we find with a mismatch there is that no matter how hard you work and how well you do things, nothing happens. You don't hear a pat on the back. You don't hear a wow, thank you for saving the conversation with that client. We really got a better deal than I thought we were. Da 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 something, a new opportunity, pay raise, promote whatever it is. There's a sense in which no matter what you do, you're not getting any sort of positive recognition. We're finding that it's not so much pay and benefits, although that's part of it, but recognition that somebody says thank you and boy that was great, or I'd really love to learn how you handled that student that time because I could do it better, I realize. So that's the third area. The fourth area, we've heard a lot about this in recent years, is the workplace community. And what that means is you and the other people whose paths you cross periodically in the course of doing your job. And so it's colleagues, bosses, people you supervise, patients, clients, whoever, the public, depending on what your job is. And are those relationships one that there's trust, there's support? Even if you disagree, there's a way in which we're going to figure out a solution that we can, move forward on. And when it's working badly, you've got bullying, you've got incivility, you've got harassment, you've got people being treated badly by each other, kind of thing. You don't speak up and say anything critical because they're going to get it thrown under the bus, kind of thing. So people are talking about this as a socially toxic workplace,
Right.
not
Right.
just the physical toxic
Yeah.
things, but socially toxic. I love what I do. I think I'm good at it. Can I not have to be in this office with these people, kind of thing. For some people, working from home was a partial solution to that, actually, but not always. But that socially toxic thing that's come about has just been, and as part of that hustle, grind culture, it's really unfortunately shredded the kind of social connections that keep us balanced, healthy. This is how we learn from each other, we support each other, we help each other out, that kind of thing. So psychological safety is a really important part of that, being belonging and feeling like, yeah, you can go to someone for help or advice or point out something that's not working so well or make a suggestion. So the community,
That's big. Yeah.
yeah,
That's a
it's
big.
a very big one. The fifth is fairness. Turns out this is a basic core need that all human beings have. We want to be, whatever the rules, the laws, the policy, we want to be treated fairly. And what happens in an unfair environment is that the wrong people are getting promoted or rewarded. The right people who are doing the work and whatever are not. And this is where discrimination lives, where glass ceilings exist. People feel that you're not being treated fairly. And this breeds the cynicism big time, about why am I
absolutely.
working, in this kind of environment.
Or even the perception of not being fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
sometimes there's just the perception, managing the perception of whether something is fair or not, because people,
Yeah.
are observing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then the sixth area is what we talk about as values. People also talk about meaning or purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, this is that we want to feel we're doing something that's worthwhile, it's important, that makes a contribution, that is a good thing, teaching young kids and giving them a good start in life, that sort of keeps you going even when the rest of the job is, difficult. So when people are working in areas where the mismatch there's ethical conflicts, you have to do things you think are wrong or morally, sort of unsavory. You're having, the job is in a sense forcing you in some ways, or it's don't say anything about this. If you see something wrong, it'll be bad for the company. Keep it quiet. Those kind of things. There's lots of different kinds of value conflicts or feeling that you are being compromised in ethical ways. And after a while, people say, this is like an erosion of my soul. I can't keep doing this, going on. And I won't, kind of thing. Or, you have to lie to make the sale. You have to cheat a bit, all this kind of stuff. And so that's more difficult to kind of raise, but it's sometimes the thing that people say, I'm out of here. I cannot. I'll find another hospital. I will find another, kind of company to work for that doesn't put me in this ethical bind, because where's the meaning? Where's the purpose? I'm selling people things they don't need
Right.
and charging
I'm
them
making a
money.
difference.
So
It's also
I'm
personal.
it's because that's what I'm supposed to do is get my sales numbers up from last year, kind of thing. So those are the six, and we find that any one or more of them can be signs, and to people that this is not a good match for me in this job. And are there ways in which they can modify the job or modify their skills or whatever it is, or work with other people, which is most necessary usually, so that we have a better solution, which creates an environment where we can thrive rather than get beaten down. That's really the so that old phrase, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Right. Right.
Well, you know what? That's part of the mantra that used to be, I haven't heard it so much anymore. The job is what it is. And that's always saying, if there's not a good match, it's up to you to make up the difference. You've got to work harder. You've got to, do whatever. Well, the kitchen can change. You could put the heat down. You could make it better ventilated.
Right.
You could get better relationships between the chef and all of the, the other people. You could look at both sides of it. So we want to get out of this either or, it's your problem or it's your problem, and say it's our problem in the sense of it's not working as well for the people we've hired who we think should be doing a good job, and we want to get a good return on that investment in those people. So we should make a good environment where they can really bloom and blossom and do their best and really make a good contribution.
What you're talking about is just so fundamental to good leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that you're bringing up, I'm cheering, because I think it's so important for us to revisit some of the basics that you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you, I could talk to you all day about this topic because it's
Really?
such a huge one, and I would invite people to check out your book, that you co-authored, the Burnout Challenge, because you have such good stories and such good advice and nuggets in here that I think are really important about all the things that you just talked about, and a lot
Thank you.
more.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, just in terms of advice for leaders
Mm-hmm.
who are in these workplaces, who are actually feeling burnt out themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and who are are trying to create environments, but are also feeling all the pressures of the demands
Mm-hmm.
of bringing out results or performing or competition, or the uncertainty in the
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Right.
How do you help combat this and create a culture that minimizes this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an excellent question, and the way you framed it. And I say that because also that, in a sense, was the reason that we wrote the book. We're trying to pull together everything we think we know about this and put it in language, not academic journal kind of
Right.
things, but in everyday language, so that everybody, from the C-suite, to the employees on the floor, whatever is doing, are all on the same page and understanding what are the kind of causes of burnout and how can we use that information to change things. So what we often find, and I think I referred to it in that example I gave earlier about somebody saying, I never get asked, I never have a chance for input. One of the things we often see is that there is not good communication between different levels, between different units, teams, whatever, in an organization. And so these people are trying to figure out, what should we do? And these other people are thinking, why don't they do something that would help? But they're not actually getting together to sort of say, what are some of those key stressors that would really make a difference? And so more often than not, unfortunately, I see things that are being done. This will be good for our people, without talking to our people. And
Right.
then when I'm talking to their people, they're saying, what the hell was that? You put a volleyball court on the roof, which took an enormous amount of money to fix the building, the roof, and here's our everyday workload. You could have spent a fraction of that money on this, and we could have, gotten. So there's, again, having a more collaborative communication where we talk about not what's causing burnout, but reframe it as, how could we make things a little better around here? And make that a regular point of conversation. It's on the agenda every month or every year. I mean, we stop and kind of do a checkup, like we do a medical checkup. How are we doing? Are we eating the right things? Are we exercising, et cetera? So what's going well and what's not going so well? And what could we do to begin to fix that? And make that a thing that really says it's we, not just that person or that person. Identify what are some of those chronic job stressors. And the term that I like that was used in research that's been done on physician burnout is pebbles in your shoe. And I like it because it gets at the scale of things. It's not like we have to do some enormous $1 billion something or other, to deal with burnout. No, it's these chronic job stressors that are these pebbles in the shoe, that they're there all the time. Most of the time, they drive you nuts. They get in the way. They are obstacles. You should be working with your client, and then you have to run off because, you don't have the equipment to make the copies of the contract that you're trying to, push, whatever. So it's getting those, what are the top 5 pebbles right now, that are
right
going at us.
Love
And
it.
what those pebbles, those chronic stressors, will be for a CEO, for example, or a CFO, are going to be different than the ones for the people who are working over here in pediatrics, or
Right.
teaching, this class for, kids, or, whatever that
But they're
happens to
just
be.
as significant.
There is significant, and so you take the generic thing of, what is it about, the feedback that we get from each other that's helpful, and we don't have it. Well, it's going to look different. So you have to customize from the generic to, so what does that mean here in our tech company, which is not going to be the way it's going to look in a hospital setting, which is not going to be the same as it looks in a classroom. But it may all be dealing with, how do we make a more reasonable workload, that's achievable,
Right.
and we can do it well. So there's that collaborative to really listen to each other, to get feedback, to get people on the same page, because anybody who has to carry out somebody else's decision had better believe that this is going to help, because otherwise they'll have a shadow system, and they won't actually implement things very well. And then the third thing I would say is, so after sort of more of this collaborative communication, the customization, actually commit to trying this out fixing it a little bit more as you go along to say, oh, we could do it a little bit better. We hadn't thought about X. Now we should, et cetera. But commit until we get it right. And then be able to say, okay, we took care of that. And now let's sort of wait a while, get, into it. We'll check in again a couple months and sort of see what else could we be doing, So I think that the making it clear that these 6 areas and the way you think about the sort of causal factors within each kind of apply to all of us, but depending on our work and where we are and what we're doing, it won't be. So there's not anything like a one size fits all. If you just take aspirin, your headache will go. Everybody, okay? No, what's going to happen to this unit actually needs something different than what's happening over here. And so the idea of just a single solution, you put it in effect for everybody and burnout will be gone. I have yet to see that in reality. That's just not the case.
I love that. I love that you're ending on that note, because I think that is so important. What I'm getting as a summary of a lot of the things that you're saying, not of your 6 things, which are so valuable, is that it's really going back to basics. It's going back to the fundamentals of good leadership, of people leadership, of interacting with people, and that there isn't a recipe. I think what I find in the work that I do is people keep looking for the recipe. What are the 6 steps I need to do so I can put it on my to-do list so I can do those things? Yeah. And then poof, magically the workplace will change. And I think what you're saying is it's systemic, and it's little choices every single day of how we're leading organizations. And this is such a great work. We're gonna definitely put the link to the book so that people have access to it.
Thank you.
But I really, really thank you for spending time with us today and walking us through this concept of burnout, because I think it's such an important topic. And I think there are so many people even listening today that are dealing with this right now.
Yeah. And I think then the message is, it's not just me, it's we. I mean, and we need to find ways in which we can create in a sort of continual, not one time only, but on a continuous improvement basis. Doesn't mean every single day we have to do this new process. We do it every once in a while, try something, try to make it better, keep at it, celebrate it when it works, fix it to make it better if it doesn't. And then a couple months later, check in again. The world keeps changing and evolving, and our work conditions keep changing and evolving. The way I was doing teaching at the university 50 years ago is not the way we teach now, but there's been all kind of new things we've discovered about how people best learn and different things that we can do and new technology. So you have to keep changing and updating and saying, what's better to do it now, not just how we've always done it, but, for this. And so that kind of continuous checking in, periodically, and just say, let's get everybody's voice on the same page and say, what could make a difference? How could we, not just me, how could we do something better for all of us around here?
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure talking with you.